This meeting will now come to order. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Mayor Carlett.
Here.
Vice Mayor Binsbacher.
Here.
Councilmember Patena.
Here.
Councilmember Edwards.
Here.
Councilmember Finn.
Here.
Councilmember Hunt. Here. Councilmember Leone.
Here.
Thank you. Good evening and welcome to the Peoria City Council special meeting of January 10th, 2017. We have one item on our study session agenda this evening, and it is legislative update and financial overview. So I will turn this over to City Manager Carl Swenson.
Thank you, Mayor Carlin, and Happy New Year to the Council coming back after the winter break. Welcome back. And yes, it's one item, but it has two parts, the legislative update and a little bit on our financial update, kind of a precursor as we get into the budget season later this spring. But of course, the main subject tonight is the legislative update. And of course, just this week, yesterday, the mayor and vice mayor, I know, attended the Governor's State of the State speech, which is the kickoff to the legislative session. So our legislature is in session and they're moving ahead, and it's a good time for us to have a little bit of a discussion with the council about our legislative priorities and what we see coming in the legislative session that is just begun. And so that's the main event in this study session. And so with that, I'll turn it over to Thomas Atkins, our Intergovernmental Affairs Director, to lead the presentation. Thomas?
Thank you, Mr. Swenson. Mayor, Council, thank you very much for this opportunity to provide an update on intergovernmental affairs in the upcoming session. With me is Jenna Carrico, who works in the Intergovernmental Affairs Office with me and is a great assistance down at the legislature. And obviously, we've got Katie Gregory with us to talk about budget. But also, in addition, Katie is also going to hit on some of the financial impacts of some of the recent legislative issues that we've been dealing with to provide a greater context and also illustrate why we pay so much attention to the Arizona legislature. So, to get that going, I will get our slides going up. So our presentation today is really going to focus on four primary areas. I'm going to talk a little bit about the new federal administration coming in, and then Jenna is going to focus primarily on some of the state issues. And then I've got a good news item from the region, the Maricopa Association of Governments I want to mention. And then Katie is going to give us a quick budget preview. So, on the federal side of things, all eyes will be on Washington, D.C. next week when President-elect Trump is sworn into office on Friday. The incoming president's first 100-day plan focuses on three areas that are listed on the slide. Cleaning up Washington includes items such as term limits for Congress, a federal hiring freeze, and new restrictions on when former staff members can become lobbyists. Protecting American workers includes items such as renegotiating NAFTA, withdrawing from the Trans-Pacific Partnership, identifying foreign trade abuses, lifting restrictions on American energy production, and reallocating billions from the UN climate change programs towards American water and environmental infrastructure. Now, what exactly is that water and environmental infrastructure? That remains to be seen, but it is something of note that we'll be keeping a close eye on. Restoring the rule of law entails canceling previous executive actions, although it's unclear which executive actions he's referring to. Replacing Supreme Court Justice Scalia, canceling all federal funding to sanctuary cities, and on a quick side note, the definition of a sanctuary city is not really clear. It's not defined in Arizona statute. It's generally understood to be cities that do not cooperate with federal immigration law enforcement. To my knowledge, there are no sanctuary cities in Arizona. Additionally, the president-elect wants to remove criminal aliens, which he estimates to be about 2 million, and also suspending immigration from terror-prone regions. Now, beyond this plan, he's also working with Congress, or plans to work with Congress, to introduce several key pieces of legislation. Primarily, he wants to focus on tax reform for the middle class, increased public-private partnerships so that more infrastructure in America can be built, repealing and replacing the Affordable Care Act, building a wall along the southern border with Mexico, and increasing funding and programs that train and assist local law enforcement. So obviously on that one, we're going to be keeping a close eye to see what that means. The president-elect is also really focused on strengthening our U.S. military and national defense. Unfortunately, the president, or at least for the president, he's going to have to work with Congress to accomplish many of his goals. Even with a supermajority in the Senate a few years ago and a friendly House, President Obama had great difficulty in getting many of his policies enacted. So he doesn't have a supermajority in the Senate going forward, and so President-elect Trump is certainly going to face some challenges there with some of his policy ideas. Among these challenges, congressional support for some of his policies is cool at best, particularly term limits. Senator McConnell, who's the majority leader in the Senate, has said that that's not going to be on the agenda there, so we'll see how that plays out. There will also be a challenge with Cabinet and Supreme Court Justice confirmations. For example, today, Senator Jeff Sessions is Trump's appointment to become the next Attorney General. The confirmation hearing has been going on all day. I've kind of been keeping a loose eye on that just out of curiosity. Here's a senator who is a member of the Judiciary Committee, which is doing the confirmation, and even he is facing close scrutiny. So with one of their own, this type of scrutiny, it's be curious to see how outsiders and those that aren't part of the Senate face their confirmation hearings. And obviously, Supreme Court justice confirmations tend to be very controversial historically, at least recently. Lastly, it's really uncertain how the new administration's policies are going to be received internationally. How will these foreign policy changes impact trade and commerce with the United States? And how will those changes impact trade and commerce within Arizona and with Peoria businesses? These are some of the main unknowns that we're trying to figure out at this point. Politically, it still remains unclear how successful the president is going to be working with Congress. He does have a good momentum moving forward, and so we're curious to see how that plays out. Further, again, what he's proposed in his first 100-day plan is something that was developed on the campaign trail. And so what he's proposed and promised on the campaign it will vary from when that gets implemented or introduced in Congress, and then certainly once it goes through the lawmaking process, what was introduced isn't always what looks like the finished product, so we'll keep an eye on that as well. What is clear, and one of the items that we've been keeping a close eye on, is the notion of infrastructure. This is important across the country, but certainly in Arizona. In the older parts of the country, there's existing infrastructure that needs to be replaced, but even in parts of Arizona, there's new infrastructure that is needed and some that needs replacing as well. However, what we have seen from comments from Speaker Ryan and others are that a stimulus package like what we saw in 2009 does not appear to be likely. So how the infrastructure funding and what has been talked about on the campaign trail, what that actually looks like coming from Congress is unknown. But I want to assure you that this is an issue that is a top priority for us on the federal level. Aside from what our congressional delegation may focus on, this is an important issue for Peoria and something that we're keeping an eye on should an opportunity arise to get funding for infrastructure, which is something that we certainly need, particularly in the growing part of our city. So shifting a little bit to a popular subject for a lot of us is Luke Air Force Base. The good news here, well, actually, it's pretty much all good news. The F-35 mission is still on track. Right now, there are about 45 F-35s on the ramp at Luke Air Force Base. This is about 100 less than what our final allotment will be, which is about 6 squadrons. Luke will become the largest F-35 training base in the world. The F-35 is the premier fighter aircraft in the world. And so the pilots that we train go into combat, or that Luke trains, I won't take too much credit, but Luke trains, they can go into combat literally weeks and months as soon as their training is complete at Luke. So not only is Luke an important economic contributor to the region, it's estimated, it's an older study, but it estimates about a $2 billion impact to the state economically. It's also an integral part of our national defense system, and that's something that we can take a lot of great pride in. Peoria, as you know, has been a historic, one of the biggest champions, if not the biggest champion and supporter of Luke Air Force Base and the men, women, and families that work there. As part of that, we have Councilmember Patina that sits on the Luke West Valley Council, and he's a good advocate and keeps everybody up to date. Senator McCain attended the last meeting last month and provided an update. And what was interesting to note there, and it has ties to President Trump, who's also been critical of the F-35 cost overruns. Senator McCain has pointed out those cost overruns for many years, and this is a serious concern that he has had. That said, he reiterated his support for the platform of the F-35. It's part of our national defense, and it will be for many years to come. So it was really good to hear that support reiterated, and we anticipate continued support for the F-35 program coming for many years to follow. So in addition to all of that and President-elect Trump's calling for a stronger military, we are reasonably confident that Luke Air Force Base will continue to receive the federal support that it needs so that it can continue to be an important part of our economy and national defense. So moving on to state issues here, and this is really going to be the meat of our presentation. There's a few things we want to highlight. Jen is going to talk a little bit about some of the election results, legislative leadership, and also a state of the state recap, and also a sneak preview of some of the upcoming legislative issues we're dealing with. But one of the things I want to talk about are the recent legislative impacts. This time of the year, this first half of the year, the legislature takes up nearly all of the IGA team's time and energy. The legislature has a massive impact in the way all of us as Arizona citizens can live and operate, but it can also have a major impact on how cities are able to deliver and provide services for its citizens. Occasionally, legislation is passed with the intent to help special interest groups, usually a business or industry, to help them become more profitable or efficient. While this can generally be a noble goal, some of the side effects of that can cause severe impacts to the ability of local governments to fund the services that their residents want. So because of that, the Intergovernmental Affairs team is devoted to protecting the interests of Peoria residents at the legislature. We're really diligent, and Jen is going to talk about our process of reviewing legislation, because we want to make sure that in the legislature's desire to improve the quality of life for Arizona residents, that there are no impacts to local government residents. Most of Arizona citizens live within cities. And so while the legislature has a focus at the high level on the state level, it's important that they hear from cities like Peoria so that they understand the impact of what they're doing, so that there are no negative impacts, or at least mitigated as much as possible. Jen is going to highlight a couple of those wins from this past session. But before we do that, Katie is actually going to cover a little bit of some of the recent legislation issues that we've been dealing with going back the last 5 to 10 years, and some non-legislative things, and talk about how they've had a major impact on Peoria's ability to provide services.
Yeah, so I wanted to just spend a couple of minutes just talking about some things that probably you recall, or things that you remember from past legislative decisions that have been made that have had impacts on the city. One of the main ones, or one of the primary ones, was our HERF revenues. That's been an area where the city has unfortunately been subject to a number of cuts associated, or shifts, I should say, associated with that. And what do we use HERF revenue for? They're first of all, they're generated through the fuel taxes, the motor carrier taxes, the VLT, the vehicle license tax, and the motor vehicle registration fees. That's where those revenues come from. And then they're part of the state shared revenue equation, right? So the distribution through state shared revenues. And they're used really to fund in the city our streets operations and a number of our maintenance programs, such as our major street repairs, our street maintenance program, our traffic signal program, street light program. Those types of things are what we use a lot of that funding for. So many of you are probably aware that in 2009, the HERF revenues, well, first were hit hard by the recession, right? So that was the kind of the first hit we took on HERF, and that was no fault of anyone but the recessions, I suppose. But then it was further hit when the state then started diverting or shifting more funding to the Department of Public Safety, we started seeing that increased reduction in our revenues. And now, that was through from about 2009 to about 2014. In 2014, the 2014 legislative session, the state did start to try to restore some of those HERF revenues. They restored a portion of our local HERF revenues. And again, in this last legislative session, they did some additional one-time funding in HERF. So, but even with those additions, the shifts that occurred throughout the downturn had about a $6.7 million impact to the city over the last 10 years of revenues that we weren't able to receive through some of those shifts. So while we're heading in the right direction, and we've heard that they're going to continue the one-time the one-time restoration for fiscal year 18, again, we have to watch the state's budget, and as they start to see some struggle with their budget, this is clearly a place that they are used to going to when they're looking for ways to find additional revenues for some of their programs. There are some indications that Governor Ducey has some ideas for how we might generate more revenues to help support the DPS operations, but the level of support for that is yet to be kind of figured out. So kind of more to come on that, I suppose. The other one I wanted to talk a little bit about was the legislative decision in 2011, Senate Bill 1525, that was the major change to the state's impact fees statute. So the financial implications of that really go beyond just a loss of revenues. I think what I kind of look at it is a change in the equation of how growth pays for growth. And it becomes a very different conversation when you think about it that way. Peoria is a growing community. For many years, we understood how we were going to fund a lot of these things, and many of those things we no longer can fund through that source. Some of the core public services, such as water, wastewater, streets, and public safety, were left relatively unharmed in that. But the major areas that were hit with the impact fee legislation were in the areas of parks, open space, parks and trail development, open space preservation, recreation facilities, libraries, those areas where, now we have a significant funding gap in those areas, and we have to figure out how to support some of those as growth continues. We will continue to grow as a city. We have about 1,400 new homes coming into the city every year. We're projecting to see that, grow, but maybe stabilize a little bit. That brings with it, 3,000 to 4,000 new residents into the community. So we know we're going to have needs that we need to address, and unfortunately, we have some shortfalls in the areas of impact fees. Some of the tax policies, I wanted to touch on this because they're kind of like these unknown, they can be complex, right? Tax policies can be very complex, and sometimes it's hard to dig into them and really understand what the impacts of those are. Fortunately, I've got some really good crack staff that have the ability to figure some of these things out. But even during the recession, and this is what kind of is a little bit amazing to me, is that even during the recession, a lot of those tax cuts were continuing, and they were continuing to occur at the state level. And so some were in the form of what we sometimes hear about, which are those sales tax exemptions, things that kind of come through when there's some lobbying we don't want to have to pay sales tax anymore for this, whatever we are involved in. And some of those get through. And that does ultimately have an impact to the city in the form of state shared revenues that get reduced from that. But the big one was in 2011 when the legislature passed a $538 million phased-in corporate income tax cut. And this was done really at the time with the intention of really stimulating the economy, all good, good purposes, and also to help businesses, to try to help businesses stay in business during the recession. Having said that, though, it does result in real impacts to the city and the counties in our shared revenues. And so as a city, we've seen about a $16 million reduction over time based on tax policy changes over the last 10 years that have reduced our amount of revenues that we're receiving. So in the case of the corporate income tax, we're going to continue to see some of those impacts because that is a phased-in cut that's going to continue through 2019. So just, we understand that, but at the same time, it's, those are some of the things that happen that you kind of don't always see. They don't always get above the radar in some ways. And then with that, the state budget, we're always concerned, clearly, with the state budget. How well they're doing sometimes has a direct effect on, where our revenues are going to come from and, what we have to really be keeping our eyes on and really have our eyes and ears open down at the legislature to understand how they're planning to address any kind of shortfalls they may have. The fiscal year 2017 does, the JLBC is, it's continuing with the slow growth at the state level, yet we're hearing this very full agenda yesterday, a very full agenda of things that we'd like to accomplish, and how they accomplish those things are going to be interesting to see what they propose to do that. So we'll continue to watch, and Thomas and Jenna will be down there, and you all will be asked, I'm sure, from time to time to help out. But as those things come through, we will be assessing the impacts of that and working to try to mitigate that as much as possible.
Before we move on, I would like to ask a question here. So the cities and the state have an agreement to the city collects taxes and shares those back to the city based on population. So there is an agreement in place that has to do with state shared revenues. It's not as if they're giving us a gift. It's as if those taxes are paid for the benefit of the citizens who live in the various cities. And so when they take those funds, and they decide to give them, instead of to the citizens who live in the city, they give it to the Department of Public Safety, or they just do something else with it, put it in their general fund or whatever. Is there no ramifications? Are there any laws in place that prevent them from manipulating state shared revenue in a way that takes it away from the citizens of the city?
You can answer that one a little bit better.
Well, it sort of depends on the type of revenue that is being discussed. So when we're talking about HERF that isn't tied to the compact, the state shared that where there was an agreement to divvy up the shared revenue, yes, they're able to do that. The ramifications are more felt by the cities, but there are no, I should say, the legislature, when they go through their process, they have a legal review, a cursory one usually, but a legal review to make sure that what they're doing is quote unquote legal and constitutional and proper form. So they do have the ability with some types of revenue that we do share like HERF to do that. Other types of revenue, when it comes to sales tax, they're very limited in what they can do with that. There are statutes that protect that. But it just depends on the revenue that we're talking about.
Okay,
If
so
I may,
with-
Mayor, I think just to add a little more to that, you may recall, those of you that have been on council for some time, that several years ago there was an instance where the state had taken more from cities than was legally than they were legally able to do, and that ultimately resulted in a lawsuit by the state, by the cities, the League of Cities, to the state, and the League of Cities prevailed, and the money was distributed. I believe that was income tax money that was being distributed at the time, that where more was withheld by the state than they were legally to do. That's an extreme example. In my recollection, it's the only time that we've, at least in the last 10 years, that cities have had to actually sue to get the money that was owed to them. But it's an example of the give and take, the push and shove, however you want to think of it, that goes on in this context. Because obviously the state is trying to stretch the scarce dollars that they have and provide the services, as are all the cities. And at some point, no one wants to raise taxes. And so we find ourselves in a situation where from time to time, actions can be taken by the state as they are trying to stretch the dollars and not raise taxes, that wind up putting us in a situation where if we're going to continue to deliver the services that our citizens expect, we're caught in a place where where's that money going to come from? And impact fees are a real good example of that, where, as Katie mentioned a minute ago, that change in the impact fee laws, where basically the tried and true growth paying for growth in Arizona was changed. It no longer is the case across the board. And in a city like Peoria that is experiencing dramatic growth, and where we have principles where we want to deliver the same level of service all across the city, we're now in a situation where we don't have the funds readily available to provide some of those services in those growing areas that we used to have before that law was changed. So that's an example of the pressure. I'm sorry, it's kind of a long answer to your question, but it's one of those pressures that we feel keenly as we budget to try to meet the needs of the city as it grows. We don't have the revenues we used to have.
And many citizens believe that property taxes pay for growth. So they think with every new home, there's going to be enough property taxes to take care of all of the services and amenities that the residents of that home needs, but that is not the case. And
Right.
in most of the western United States, property taxes are not the large source of revenue for cities. It is sales tax. We are governed and we pay for our growth through sales tax and through impact fees. And both of them have been diminished greatly, and growth no longer pays for itself. And as a matter of fact, I believe that it is $21 million that has been taken from the cities in the form of impact fees in just the last 3 years. $21 million is a lot of money for a growing city. So growth does not pay for itself. Right. And I do have one question. You said that the highway user revenue funds are outside of the compact of shared revenues, but the city of Peoria and all cities pay for their public safety themselves. And it is, to my understanding, the obligation of the state of Arizona to pay for the Arizona Department of Public Safety, while we pay for our local public safety. And yet we are giving them our highway user revenue funds so that they can pay for the Arizona Department of Public Safety costs. How does that work, and why is this happening?
The short answer
Yes.
is that statute does provide for a portion of HERF to be used for highway patrol, which is just one division within DPS. So statute already allows a certain dollar amount, and I forget, it's 10 million, right? Thank you.
10 million coming from other
HERF.
sources or from the state's HERF?
From the HERF fund overall, 10 million can be used for highway patrol.
I see.
Because it's state law and the legislature makes state law, they can use this magic word, notwithstanding, which basically means ignoring. So they will say, ignoring state law, beyond the 10 million, we are going to now use 100 million that will go towards, from HERF towards highway patrol within DPS. You know, it's a difficult thing for them because, as Carl mentioned, they're trying to maximize their tax dollars. Public safety is a top issue for them as it is for us. And so politically, it's about what they're able to accomplish down there. Tax increases are essentially a non-starter at the legislature generally. And so it is essentially more politically viable to take money from different funds to piecemeal to fund with state services than it is to, say, raise revenue.
Omnipotent. Okay. Council, any other questions or comments? Okay, go ahead.
Mayor and Council, to continue on with recent legislative impacts, I'm going to provide some highlights from this last session. Despite a heavy anti-city tone, we did see a lot more wins than we did losses. I have a few highlighted here, and as you can see, the infamous Senate Bill 1487 was our big loss for the session. Starting off with residential rental, TPT was an early win in the session for us. Representative Mitchell introduced this bill. Last year was the second time we had seen it. This version of the bill would have exempted landlords of 2 or fewer properties from having to pay residential rental TPT. This version of the bill would have cost Peoria approximately $700,000. What was most concerning to us with this bill was his well-known intent to expand it to all landlords being exempted from residential rental TPT, which would have been a hit to us of closer to $3 million. Fortunately for us, we were able to work with Representative Fan in our Legislative District 1, who led the opposition against this bill and killed it early on in Committee of the Whole. We did not see it again the rest of the session. Another early win for us was the pipe bill. Representative Leach was willing to work with us through our contract lobbyist, Nick Simonetta. This bill would have prohibited public bodies from preferring one type of piping material over another for water, wastewater, or stormwater draining projects. Thankfully, Nick was able to work with Representative Leach, and he held the bill before it was even heard in committee. Next up, we have the Community Facilities District bill, which you are all familiar with. Speaker Gowan teamed up with the development community last session to introduce this revamp of how we control, operate, and maintain community facility districts. After a tough fight, one in which the CFD bill even lost in the Speaker's own house, only to be revived a couple hours later, of course, because that's how it works down there sometimes. Governor Ducey vetoed the bill, citing taxpayer protection as his main concern. This legislation was easily one of the most contentious of the session, and a constant battle between Speaker Gowan and the development community and the home builders and the cities. This outcome was...
Real quick, I just want to interject on this particular bill. This is a good example, and as was the one immediately before it, where Peoria was a main leader on the issue. On all of these wins and the losses, you know, the city of Peoria is part of a larger coalition. We work with sister cities. We work in the state. We work with the League of Arizona Cities and Towns, which represents cities at the legislature. But in a few of these bills, particularly the CFD bill, I'm proud to say that Peoria was a leader in advocating for our taxpayers, to protect them, to make sure that the property taxes they pay would be predictable and reasonable. And because of our efforts and because of many of the talking points that we used, we were really pleased to see the governor used some of those same talking points in his veto letter. And as part of that big fight last year, it resulted in numerous concessions amongst the speakers. He tried to revive his bill, including the revamping and reinstating of kids care. So that was an important policy, although not the Peoria's, but something else that came about because of the work and leadership of the city of Peoria. So we're really glad that the mayor and council and the manager gave us that discretion and authority to go down there and be good champions for our residents. So thank you for that.
If I might just interject for a minute, you were not only good champions, you were superheroes. I mean, that was a really, really scrappy fight. And you had a lot of weight on the other side, and you were still able to prevail. This would have allowed developers to come into our city, in any city, and create their own taxing authorities within their own neighborhoods with no safeguards in place. If they went out of business, then the citizens were just at a loss. They would have to cover the rest of that tax. And it could have been, just so detrimental to the residents of the city of Peoria or any city. So it's an atrocity that it got as far as it did, but it's just amazing how hard you guys fought and all the things that you had to overcome to win that battle. So I just really want to thank you for that on behalf of the citizens.
Thank you, Mayor. Moving on to the census bill. This was a league resolution last year and was sponsored by Representative Olson. This now allows all 91 cities and towns to proportionally allocate state-shared revenue based on annual population estimates. And because Peoria is a fast-growing city, this allows us to get our fair share of the state-shared revenue pie. Lastly, the HERF task force, as Katie touched on, the legislature has given $100 million worth of HERF to DPS. Senator Worsley formed Senate Bill 1490, which formed the Surface Transportation Task Force, which has met bi-monthly this interim since September to identify funding solutions for Arizona's transportation revenue shortfalls. We'll get into some of their exact recommendations in a few slides, but this was promising for us last session. And of course, then Senate President Andy Biggs, Senate Bill 1487, which in short penalizes cities that are found by the AG's office to be in violation of state law or the state constitution by withholding a portion of their state-shared revenue. There have been a few complaints thus far since the bill's passage, but the one everyone is keeping their eye on right now is with the City of Tucson's gun ordinance. Representative Mark Fincham of Tucson filed with the AGs, and the AGs did confirm that Tucson's ordinance to destroy guns seized by the city may be in violation of a state law, and the Tucson City Council voted to continue with their ordinance anyway, resulting in the AG filing in court against the city. Since that time, the City of Tucson's filed an injunction in the state Supreme Court to question the constitutionality of the bill itself, rather than if their ordinance is in violation of state law. The League has also filed an amicus brief to join that effort, and we all wait to see if Senate Bill 1487 will be found constitutional or not.
One reason that this bill is particularly important is because the City of Tucson, like the City of Peoria, is a charter city. And the Arizona Constitution provides that incorporated or municipalities essentially that have charter authority are essentially free of too much of the state's control over us if it is a quote-unquote purely local issue. So the question is whether or not Tucson's destruction of property, in this case confiscated weapons, if that is an issue of local control. So that is the crux of this. The Supreme Court has previously ruled that local elections are a purely local-ish concern, and so that's not an issue that the state can interfere with. Now, obviously, Peoria doesn't necessarily have the same ordinance in place of Tucson, but what this means for future challenges, if there are complaints that are brought under 1487, this could have a really wide-ranging impact to the city. Our attorney, city attorney, is part of a coalition of city attorneys that work with the league, that just filed an amicus brief, as Jenna said. So he's up to speed on this issue. It's something that we're keeping a very close eye on, and we will obviously keep you updated as more information and updates come forward. So it's an incredibly important court case that could have some big impacts for us.
Is it factual that if a city is going to challenge the state on a 1487 issue, that they have to put a large sum of money up as a retainer, and in the case of Tucson, in the neighborhood of $50 million?
Yes. Mayor, this is one of the disturbing parts of the bill. So essentially, if a legislator files a complaint or thinks that a city may be violating state law or the state constitution, he or she files a complaint with the Attorney General office asking the AG to look into it. The AG then has something like 30 days to look into the issue. And by the way, this is creating a major issue for the Attorney General, who's having to take his staff off of major issues to focus on these things in order to meet the time deadlines. So he's got 30 days to make a determination whether or not the city does not violate state law. He can make that determination, which is fine. He can make a determination that it does violate state law, in which there is a brief curing period where the city is allowed to fix the ordinance if they want. If they fail to fix it, then the Attorney General instructs the state treasurer to withhold all of that city's state shared revenues, which for most cities, the state shared revenues comprises around 30% to a half of all your general fund operational money. So you could lose all of that if you don't comply with state law, and it would get redistributed amongst the other cities. That has not happened yet. Or what has happened, the AG can make a determination like he has in Tucson, which is that it may violate state law. Now, the Attorney General's official finding is that Tucson's ordinance may violate state law, but he's essentially said as much that he believes that it does. If it may violate state law, then the Attorney General in this case provided Tucson a curing period. Tucson opted not to change their ordinance because they think they're in the right. And the Attorney General then filed his paperwork with the Supreme Court to make a determination. The Supreme Court was supposed to make a judgment on whether or not Tucson's ordinance violated state law. As part of that filing, to the mayor's point, Tucson would have then been obliged to basically take out a bond for half of their state shared revenues, which in, I think, Tucson's case would have been on the magnitude of around $70 million. This obviously would have caused harm for Tucson, which is when they filed their injunction, and which has got us to this point. So it's a major issue because first, who's issuing a bond to a city that is now going to be potentially losing all of their general fund, or half of their general fund? Are they even going to be able to pay it back? Who's going to issue that bond? Our city's even able to do that, what the cost is. So yes, it's your mayor. It was a very unfortunate, disturbing legislation, which hopefully the courts will find is unconstitutional.
Okay, and I do just want to point out that out of 91 cities, there is only, I believe, 19 cities that are actually chartered, and Peoria is one of those charter cities, as well as Tucson. And so I hope that that charter prevails. It is supposed to protect the local control. Citizens, the residents of the city of Peoria have control over what happens within our own city.
Absolutely. And I also want to make the point, and this is a point that we made clear throughout last year's process, and we continue to do so, which is the city of Peoria follows and abides by all federal, state laws. We are very compliant. We do what's right. But we do still, those same laws, that same Constitution does provide us a bit of autonomy on purely local issues.
Thank you.
Wanted to provide a quick legislative election update. We still do have a Republican majority in each chamber. The Democrats did gain a seat in both the House and the Senate, and we're looking at about 24 new members total between the two houses. In Peoria's legislative district specifically, we have Legislative District 1, which clips the very north part of the city. We have Senator Karen Fann, previously representative. She'll be the Vice Chair of Finance and Transportation and Infrastructure this year in the Senate. We have Representative Noel Campbell back with us for his second legislature. He'll be the Chairman of Transportation and Infrastructure in the House. Representative David Stringer, who will be an incoming new freshman legislator this year. He'll be a member on education, judiciary, and federalism. In LD 21, we still have Senator Debbie Lesko, who will chair the Senate Appropriations Committee and serve as President Pro Tem. We have Representative Kevin Payne, who's new with us. He will be a member on Ways and Means, Federalism, Transportation, and Infrastructure. And Representative Tony Rivero, who will be the chair of Local and International Affairs in the House. LD 22, we have the same delegation. Senator Judy Burgess will still be the chair of the Senate Judiciary Committee. Phil Lovis will be the chair of Rules, and Representative David Livingston, the chair of Banking and Insurance. As far as legislative leadership goes this year, we have a new president and speaker, Steve Yarbrough and J.D. Mesnard, both from Legislative District 17 in Chandler. In the Senate, we have Majority Leader Kimberly Yee and John Allen in the House, with Minority Leader Katie Hobbs in the Senate and Rebecca Rios in the House. So as you all know, session convened yesterday. As of this afternoon, I think we had closer to 120 bills introduced. So they're coming quick. We have a mid-February deadline for members to introduce those bills, and usually we anticipate about 1,200 or more, so hopefully a little more. I did just want to talk here the process that Thomas and I go through as bills get introduced. We review each of them to determine their relevance and potential impact to the city, and if we think that there's any chance, even a slight one, that they could impact us, we send them to the appropriate department directors who are really awesome about getting us quick and very helpful feedback on if we need to oppose or remain neutral or even potentially support some bills. And yesterday, the mayor and vice mayor know, as they were guests of Representative Lovis here with the mayor in that great picture, and Vice Mayor, the guest of Representative Livingston at Governor Ducey's State of the State. He gave his most lengthy speech to date that I can recall and laid out some of his top priorities for the year. Throughout the speech, he maintained a pretty centrist theme and primarily focused on his plan for education reform, from all-day kindergarten to free tuition at state universities for prospective teachers, to a signing bonus for new teachers who take jobs in poor areas. He made clear his goal is to increase spending to education every year he's in office, so we continue to look forward to that. Additionally, he called on the legislature and the business community to eliminate unneeded or outdated regulations. His goal is to eliminate a total of 500 regulations by the end of this year. Beyond that, he called for a restoration of temporary assistance for needy families, or TANF, for families who are struggling and for people trying to find work, and also called for employee centers in prisons to help inmates learn how to put together a resume and apply for jobs once they're released. Although many are optimistic about this budget, where the funding will come from remains to be seen. The budget, I think as Katie touched on, the legislature's budget analysts are estimating revenues of about $24 million to be available this year, and we'll see this Friday what Governor Ducey's budget says. Here we have a short list of some of the items we've been working on this interim and what we anticipate to see coming down the pike this session. First off, we have Representative Rivero's Peace Officer Employment Study Committee. He introduced and passed a bill last session to form this committee. He served as chair, and from Peoria we had Deputy Chief Marcel Spalding, and PPOA's President Lon Bartel sat on the committee as well. The committee met 4 times to study cities' staffing levels, application pool size, and response times. And in late December, they formally reviewed 12 recommendations and passed 10 of those recommendations. The 2 proposals that were tabled were, in short, a mandatory staffing level and a potential state shared revenue penalty for failure to comply with the committee's recommendations. We were very thankful for the comments of the chiefs, the sheriff, league staff, and Senator Kavanaugh, who is also on the committee, who helped table those 2 items, saying that they were perhaps outside of the scope of that committee. With the other 10 that were adopted, We've yet to see legislation addressing them. We hope the majority of them can be addressed through the chiefs, but the one that we do anticipate seeing a bill for is continuation of the study committee into next interim. And then,
Well, we're going to, in the interest of time, make sure we have Katie have plenty of time. We're going to talk just briefly about the CFD2 bill, what we're hearing about that. The surface transportation recommendations came out today, so we're still analyzing those, but it's all net positive. The prosperity districts and the ABOR recapture, I'll capture real briefly. So Jenna will cover CFD, and then we'll kind of skip ahead just to make sure Katie has enough time.
so briefly, we do anticipate to see the CFD issue back at the legislature this session. It's yet to be seen if the development community will introduce the same language that we saw last year, but we are focusing on reforming the current process and ways to address some of the concerns we heard. I do want to mention it is noteworthy that throughout some of the stakeholder meetings that we've been a part of at the League, Peoria has been mentioned as a model and the standard for how to best perform CFD applications, review processes, and formation and maintenance. So we will update you as we see anything going forward there. As for the Surface Transportation Task Force, as Thomas said, the recommendations were released today, but it does seem to be good news in that potentially we will see a bill through Senator Worsley that could increase the gas tax, vehicle license tax, or registration fees to make up for some of that revenue shortfall.
So real quickly on prosperity districts, this is a repeat issue from last year. There were a number of issues with it, and as a result, the idea got tabled and was discussed as a study committee over the interim. A high-level view of what a prosperity district or prosperity zone is, it's essentially kind of an overlay, and what they're focused on now is primarily with unincorporated parts of counties, where you would establish essentially a district. And within that district, there would be very limited, like 0 to none, regulations. Now, they do concede that there would be some public safety regulations. Obviously, a number of concerns with this issue moving forward, and it does have some serious ramifications potentially in the long term. So we'll have more information in our email updates about this when it reappears, but just want to put that on your radar that it's there. One other issue that I didn't get on the slide, but it's in a hearing tomorrow morning that we'll be monitoring, has to do with bond levy limits. It's kind of a simple short bill, but it's likely to pass. It's got a lot of momentum. We're working with the sponsor and stakeholders to help mitigate some of the concerns that we have. But the long story short on that bill is that basically will limit the amount of tax that local governments can collect or levy to whatever your bond debt is, minus whatever you might have in a fund balance from previous collections. Long story short, the result of this could be that the city would be required to float its tax rate rather than the current practice that we have of keeping our rate flat. So it's just something that we're going to keep an eye on, and it could have some major implications for how we do our tax collections on secondary property tax.
Lastly, quickly, the ABOR sales tax recapture. ABOR is the Arizona Board of Regents, the governing body for the 3 state universities. They proposed earlier this interim basically to exempt themselves from sales tax. The universities believe they should not have to pay that, so they would be reimbursed essentially from the state general fund. Local governments receive 18% of that sales tax, and so although the regions voted to table this issue over the interim, we are anticipating to see it in a different form this session, so we wanted to put it on your radar.
So real quickly, a quick good news story from the Maricopa Association of Governments. As many of you are aware, the Loop 202 is starting to begin construction finally. It connects with the I-10 at about 51st Avenue and then goes beyond South Mountain and then later connects back with the I-10. There are some previously unexpected, savings in the neighborhood of $900 million, which is a significant amount of money, obviously. So to help divvy up that money amongst the Maricopa Association of Governments, Mayor Carlett, who sits on Regional Council, Vice Mayor that sits on the Transportation Policy Committee, it was decided that any of those savings from the Loop 202 should be divvied up amongst the governments for previously unfunded Prop 400 projects. Because of the foresight of our former Mayor Barrett, who made it clearly noted in the minutes back in 2012 when our project fell below the funding line because of the recession and its lingering effects, and the work of our mayor, vice mayor, our city manager, and particularly our city engineer and his team, we have positioned Peoria so that we are currently on track to receive funding from the anticipated savings for the completion of the Loop through 03, not all the way to I-17, but from Happy Valley to Lake Pleasant Parkway, which is a huge win for us because it is years advance the schedule. So, assuming everything stays on track and Regional Council adopts the rebalance funding plan from MAG staff at their next meeting in February, construction will begin as soon as this spring on some of the pre-design and environmental work, with completion of the Loop through 03 in summer of 2020. This is a big win, and I can't give enough credit to our mayor, vice mayor, and management and our engineer for their work on this issue.
Great. I'm going to just take a couple quick minutes to just give a quick overview and a budget preview. I wanted to talk real quickly on our economic outlook. I'm not going to go through all of the indicators for you, but I am going to tell you that the way it's being phrased and looked at is that we have a continued expansion, but it's very conflicted. So we have there's a personality defect in our expansion on our economic outlook. And a lot of that has to do with good signs in some areas, but then they're kind of offset by other signs in other areas that we kind of scratch our heads and say, how are these things happening? One major one is, and the thing that I think that a lot of people are asking is, why is there, why this recovery is a long recovery, right? It's taking so much time to recover, and aren't we just going to roll into a next recession? Because typically you would see those cycles, and there's some concern about that. Some of what we're understanding is that this is also one of the weakest recoveries we've had, clearly. And so with that, that's kind of lengthened that recession. So, right now, all indications are we're going to continue to expand, we're going to continue to grow, and that we're not, there aren't really a lot of warning signs out there that a recession is right around the corner. It will be there eventually, but it's a little further out. So I just wanted to kind of give that overview. When we talk about budget trends, I wanted to just touch on some revenues and some expenditures real quick as we kind of, what we can expect going into the 2018 budget. I don't have any charts and graphs. This literally is my only slide to talk about this. But I want to give you a few teasers. So on the revenue side, we will continue to see positive growth in our revenue. We continue to see growth there. And at this point, we expect to meet all of our revenue targets for fiscal year 17. One item I do want to just note is that, as you know, the state took over the collections, the sales tax collections, as of January 1st. So we have no indication yet kind of how that's all going to work. In the same breath that they're taking it over, they also reduced staffing at the Department of Revenue by over 100 FTE. So it'll be very interesting to see what happens. Interesting, not in a good way, I'm thinking, but it'll be interesting to see how those they come in. So,
Katie, they also charge us for that.
We do.
Right.
We also pay
Yeah.
for a portion of their costs, yes. So, it is what it is. And right now, we're working on the assumption that we're going to continue to see those revenues and that we're not going to have any delays or impacts from some of that. But I just wanted you to be aware of that. Going forward, we kind of anticipate about a 3% a year growth in our revenue. So that's just kind of giving you that big picture. On the cost side of things, we continue to be tight. We've talked about this year over year. Major shocks can really impact us because we're right at those margins. Departments continue to do a really good job of working within their means. They're all doing great in that and incorporating efficiencies where they can. However, we do need cost increases that are out there that we do need to address, and that will put pressure on our budget in fiscal year 18. We need to look to address these items and account for any other things that have come up. And I wanted to talk about a couple of things in the budget impacts that are very recent items that have come up. Just going to talk real briefly. Prop 206 passed. That's a minimum wage piece of statute. That means that we have a few areas in our city where we have temporary or seasonal employees that's going to impact our ability. We're going to have to pay for a little bit more wages on that side, which is fine, but it does have an impact. I think one of the bigger things I'm more concerned about is how that impacts some of the contracts we have with some of our larger contracts for some of our services in the city, that we may see that come from the business community back to the city on some of those things that we contract with. So we don't know all the impacts of that yet. We're starting to see some of those trickle in. We'll keep you informed of that. The other item is related, the other two items are related to the public safety retirement system. Many of you have already heard about the Hall versus EORP Supreme Court ruling, where they have basically decided, they ruled that the increase on the employee contribution that was done in 2011 now needs to revert. So we will be taking on an additional 4% of their pension costs for our public safety employees. So that has a significant impact on our bottom line. That was something we learned about, obviously, when the ruling came out, and we didn't quite have all the amount funded in there. So we are now looking at being slightly below on our forecast where we need to be. So in addition to that, we just received the actuarials associated with our public safety retirement system. We took a significant impact on the actuarials. I could go into a lot of detail. I won't do that right now. I will be happy to talk to all of you about that. Really, the actuarials provide us what our contribution rate is going to be, and also talk about the unfunded liability that you hear a lot about. Our unfunded liability is growing, partly because of the court case, and partly because of some changes in assumptions on the part of the actuarials related to some returns on investment and benefit changes. So because of that, that was another impact that we had that we're trying to figure out how we're going to manage through. And we have lots of options. I don't want this to sound that it's bad, but we do need to talk about that and manage through some of that. And lastly, I just want to bring up on the capital program, we really are excited about, obviously, all the things that we are able to do in our capital program. We know that there's many other things that are out there that there's an interest to do. When we talk about the capital program, we always have to talk about the operating kind of tail to all those capital projects. So while there is a number of important projects coming in the next 5 years that have operating impacts that we've accounted for, if we start seeing that there's a desire to do some more, we have to take that side of it into consideration as well in terms of timing and our ability to take on the operating side of that. So wanted to just put those out there. And real quickly, just give you the budget schedule so that you have some sense of what this is. We will get you your budget books on your meeting at March 21st. That'll be an opportunity for you to review those before we have our budget study sessions with you on March 29th and 30th. And we are setting the schedule now so there will not be a need for a July meeting, however, for budget reasons anyway. So we're trying to make that go through June 20th would be our final adoption of the budget. And with that, I can answer any questions, or if you have any for Thomas or Jenna.
Council, do you have any questions or comments? Well, I would just like to say that we certainly appreciate all the work that you do, and as you get ready for the session and ready for the budget, we wish you the very best. May the wind be at your back.
Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Mayor, and thanks for the support and the partnership as we move into these important areas. Appreciate it.
Thank you. And with that, we are adjourned until our 7 p.m. meeting.
The Mayor and City Council welcome you to the Peoria City Council meeting. As a courtesy, the Mayor and City Council welcome you to the Peoria City Council meeting. As a courtesy to others, please silence all phones. If you would like to address an issue that is on the agenda, or if you would like to speak to the council regarding a non-agenda item, please complete a speaker request form, which can be found in the front lobby of the Peoria City Council chambers or in the tray to the left of the speaker's podium. Please place the completed speaker request form in the second tray to the left of the speaker's podium labeled Request to Speak. All speakers will have 3 minutes to complete their comments. A countdown clock is easily visible on the left side of the wall behind the City Council dais. Only items listed on the agenda may be addressed by the Council. Since items presented as part of a speaker's request have not been listed on the agenda, the Mayor and City Council welcome you to the Peoria City Council meeting. As a courtesy to others, please silence all phones. If you would like to address an issue that is on the agenda, or if you would like to speak to the council regarding a non-agenda item, please complete a speaker request form, which can be found in the front lobby of the Peoria City Council chambers or in the tray to the left of the speaker's podium. Please place the completed speaker request form in the second tray to the left of the speaker's podium labeled Request to Speak. All speakers will have 3 minutes to complete their comments. A countdown clock is easily visible on the left side of the wall behind the City Council dais. Only items listed on the agenda may be addressed by the Council. Since items presented as part of a speaker's request have not been listed on the agenda, and due to the requirements of open meeting laws, the Council will be unable to respond to items presented as part of the speaker's request. However, please be aware that your comments will be noted. The speaker's name will be called to speak at the appropriate time, in the order that the forms were received. Thank you for your interest and participation in the Peoria City Council meeting.
Peoria City Council meeting will now come to order. Tonight, it is my honor to announce that our Pledge of Allegiance will be led by Peoria Girl Scout Troop 2156. Please rise for the posting of the colors and the Pledge of Allegiance led by Girl Scout Troop 2156.
Girl Scouts, attention. Girl Scouts, advance.
Just have to express my thanks and appreciation to Girl Scout Troop 2156. That was awesome. The clerk will now please call the roll.
Mayor Carlett.
Here.
Vice Mayor Binsbacher.
Here.
Councilmember Patena.
Here.
Councilmember Edwards.
Here.
Councilmember Finn.
Here.
Councilmember Hunt.
Here.
Councilmember Leone.
Here.
Council Liaison Owen.
Here.
Good evening and welcome to the Peoria City Council meeting of January 10th, 2017. The first item on the agenda this evening is the swearing in of newly elected council members by Municipal Judge George Anagnost, Vice Mayor Bridget Binsbacher, Councilmember John Edwards, and Councilmember Bill Patena. Please proceed to the floor. You are more than welcome to have family members accompany you.
Mayor Carlett, members of the council, Mr. Swenson, and department heads, and members of the public, thank you for allowing the court an opportunity to participate in this ceremony tonight. And from the court and all the staff, we wish all of you here a very prosperous and a happy new year. Thank you for letting us be part of Peoria's history. I'm happy to administer the oath. If I could ask you to raise your right hands and repeat after me, please. I do solemnly swear that I will support the Constitution of the United States and the laws and the Constitution of the State of Arizona, and I will faithfully perform the duties of the office of City Council member for the City of Peoria to the best of my ability. Excellent. Congratulations, and members of the public, you may applaud for your new members.
Thank you, Judge. Congratulations to our city council members. I'd like to take a moment to ask them if they have any comments, anything they would like to say with regards to their new 4-year terms. Councilmember Patena?
Thank you, Mayor. Yes, I do have a few things to say. During my 40-plus years in the working world, I've had many really good jobs and some marginal jobs. But I can tell you with all honesty that none have been as fulfilling and as rewarding as this job. I really enjoy doing this job very much. I want to thank all the people who voted for me and trusted me to be their voice here at City Hall. And I plan to do the very best job that I can do fulfilling that responsibility. I want to talk very briefly about, in the last 4 years, I've had 3 council assistants. I've had Brianna Decker-Cortinas, who started out as my first council assistant, and she's quite a dynamo. She set the bar very, very high. And when the mayor got elected, the mayor took her away from me, and that was fine. Then I was assigned to Anthony Alejandro, who is also a very, very talented young man. And I was, I don't know, I guess I worked with Anthony maybe 1.5 years, and then the mayor took Anthony away from me. We're starting to see a trend here.
The mayor has very good taste.
And then I was assigned Karen Halstead, and Karen is also a very talented lady, and I work very well with her. And I want to say something about the council assistants. By the way, Karen hasn't lost a step. She has also set the bar very high. I want to say something about the council assistants. They make our job as council so much easier. Generally what happens is they get an email from a constituent or a phone call, and then they start the process. They determine what the issue is. They contact the appropriate staff member, and then the council members sort of zoom in at the last minute, and we dot the I and we cross the T, and we make everything seem like it's all right. But they're doing the yeoman's job, and they're doing most of the work for us. And without them, our job would be much more difficult. So I'm very grateful and thankful for all three of my council assistants. I want to thank my wife, who has been by my side for 45 years. She supported me in whatever I've wanted to do. Actually, I think she likes this job more than I like this job. I want to thank John Edwards, who helped me put up signs and take down signs, called me just about every day to find out what I was doing on my campaign that particular day. And I want to also thank the mayor for keeping me on task. Thank you, Mayor. And for helping set up my meet and greets. I also want to thank High Ground. They were my campaign people for running a great campaign in a timely fashion and on budget. I want to give a real big shout out to the Peoria Fire. Not only did they support me, but they worked weekends distributing flyers and door hangers. They were a great help to me, and I'm really very, very appreciative of their involvement. You know, there are over 2,500 cities in this country, and out of the top 50, Peoria was number 7. You know, that just doesn't happen. It happens because right now we have a council that works together. Nobody on this council has a personal agenda, and the mayor has taken her job to new heights, and she has a real vision for this city. It happens because we have a truly exceptional staff who cares about the job they do, they care about the citizens, and they care about the city. And they have also set the bar very high. It happens because we are a frugal city, we stay within budget, and we genuinely care how we spend taxpayers' dollars. It happens because we run this city using best practices. Many of our departments are accredited and perform to the highest standards. I've been through some accreditations in previous jobs. They are very difficult to attain, and they take our departments to a whole other level. It happens because our management team is credentialed through the International City, County, and Management Association. That too takes them to a whole different level, and they run the city at a very, very high level. Our city continues to get awards. Almost every week when we sit here on the dais, somebody's generally here presenting awards that they've received that month. Let me give you an example. At the Arizona Forward's 36th Annual Environmental Excellence Awards, Peoria won the coveted Crescordia Award, which is the highest honor in 3 categories: the Peoria Sports Complex Facility, the Peoria Community Garden, and the Peoria Desert Defenders Superhero Program. Peoria is truly a world-class city, and I'm looking forward to the next 4 years and continuing to move this city forward, working with this council and the mayor to continue to exceed our expectations. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Councilmember Edwards?
Well, thank you, Mayor. I'll try to be brief as Mr. Pateno was. First and foremost, I want to thank my wife, Brenda, for her encouragement, and for my family. Their unwavering support, not only through this election, but for the past 4 years, has given me strength and made me be the best council person that I can possibly be for this city. Secondly, I want to shout out to the residents of the Willow District. Thank you for your support in this election and over the last 4 years. Without your support, I could not have done and cannot do what I do. You guys in the district encourage me every single day to be the best council person I can, and I try to meet those goals. I look forward to the continued work with all of the residents of my district to bring improvements to the community and to the neighborhood. It may not sound like much to you, but in the neighborhoods, in the mature neighborhoods, it can be everything. Refurbished walls, collector streets, redesigning retention basins, and adding additional traffic signals means a lot to residents that live in those districts. And those small changes do make a difference. Ever since my first year in council, I've wanted to do nothing more than to help you, the citizens, have a voice here at City Council, and I hope that I have been able to achieve that. I will continue to consider critical aspects that will lead the city through positive growth. The natural beauty combined with our award-winning parks and libraries, our community, our open spaces, have made Peoria a very attractive community, as indicated as our recent #7 ranking in the country. Well-conceived plans for growth are critical to Peoria's future. I promise that I will do my best every day to make Peoria the very best city in the West Valley. To all the city staff, my assistant Terry Smith, the fire, the police, to every single department in this city, your dedication and professionalism to your job and to the residents of this city truly are a blessing to myself. You guys are the backbone of this city. There's no doubt about it. You are the foundation that makes Peoria the amazing and strong city that it is. To you, Mayor, and to fellow council members, I want to thank you for your dedication and passion. The city is remarkable, and each one of you truly cares about the city and the districts that you represent. Over the past 4 years, I have been thrilled to have a hand encouraging Peoria's youth and becoming engaged with the community, working with the schools, observing the work of the Peoria Youth Advisory Board, and watching STEM participate in city programs. I have seen young people grow and blossom. Some are learning leadership, others are just learning how the city and the community work. There is no limit to what young people can do, and I'm excited again to be able to support their efforts. They are the future of this city and of this country, and I'm very proud to have a hand in helping them grow. Over the next 4 years, I look forward to seeing our city blossom, and I am truly grateful for this honor, and all I can say is thank you.
Thank you very much. Vice Mayor Binsbacher?
Thank you, Mayor. First of all, I would like to thank my husband, John Binsbacher. Gosh, it's been an amazing, I don't know, almost 3 years now since we started working towards attaining a council position. And it has been different and unique in so many ways, and I know you all know what I'm talking about because you've seen it happen. But this is a tremendous commitment for every council member, for me, for my entire family. And you have encouraged me and supported me and led me to places I didn't even know I was capable of. And I am so grateful to you for your just unbelievable love and strength and support. You're awesome, and I would not be here without you. I want to thank the constituents of the Mesquite District and of Peoria, because I feel like that was such a refreshing surprise in all of this, in working towards becoming a council member. To people that you know, that you knew were going to support you, people that you know that you weren't sure how they would respond to you running for public office. And then there's the people that you don't know that just continue to surface and offer support and share your vision and encourage others to support you. That is the most humbling experience ever. And it's truly my inspiration for doing what I do and being so committed to trying to do it to the best of my ability, as we just swore to doing. So thank you to the constituents for voting for me, trusting me several times over to be in this position and represent you. And I'm looking forward to the opportunity to not just continue to work to attain the position, but to just get to work and focus on being a council member, focus on being your representative, and an amazing future for our district, because obviously there's so much growth opportunity in the Mesquite district, so much work to do, so many relationships to build, and I'm really looking forward to being a part of that. I want to thank Irene, my assistant. We came into this fairly new together, and we've learned together, we've grown together. I learned early on that we share a passion for people, a passion for serving, and getting in front of groups and communities, youth, people from all walks of life, and hearing their concerns, their needs, their desires, their vision, and that's what's going to help us to continue to be successful. So thank you for sharing that belief and that passion with me. I want to thank all of the staff for all of your support, city management, for all of your support, for helping to put me on an accelerated program here to learn quickly, and juggle a lot of different things. And it's been an action-packed 18 months, and I'm thrilled for the opportunity, and I look forward to working with this council. I want to thank all of the council members, Mayor, your vision, your leadership, your commitment to our city, all of you. I look forward to continuing to do what we do and put our citizens first. Thank you.
Well, it's a new year, isn't it? 2017. And I do want to thank the citizens of the city of Peoria for choosing to keep our city council together. Cohesive councils get things done. And this council really cares about getting things done, all for the benefit of the residents who live in Peoria. So thank you very much. And now we shall move on. The next item on our agenda is a proclamation recognizing January as Care Enough to Get in the Way Month. Joining us tonight are a group of Leadership West alumni who represent education, public, private, and nonprofit sectors. These leaders are making a difference in our schools and in our communities by creating the inaugural Care Enough to Get in the Way Youth Conference. This conference is led by students to find real ways to stand up, speak up, in hopes to save a life. Jennifer Rogers is here with her Leadership West class of 22 alumni, and I would like to ask Ms. Rogers to join me on the floor. Thank you. I am going to read a proclamation this evening, so bear with me while I do a few whereases. City of Peoria proclamation. Whereas the Care Enough to Get in the Way movement presents an ideal opportunity to help bridge the gap between our local community, government, and law enforcement in a positive way. And whereas our local schools are facing unnecessary tragedies where warning signs are placed on social media or observed in person, however, these are not being reported as serious threats or cries for help. And whereas our youth need to be empowered to report concerning posts or comments to law enforcement or school representatives, and to help spread the message that it is okay to care enough to get in the way, to speak up, to stand up, and to save a life. And whereas more than 700 students from 55 West Valley schools will be the first inaugural group to learn and promote the message to take back into their schools and communities. And now, therefore, I, Kathy Carlett, Mayor of Peoria, Arizona, do hereby proclaim January as Care Enough to Get in the Way Month. Be it further resolved that Arizona schools, students, parents, educators, police departments, and community organizations be encouraged to engage in a variety of awareness and prevention activities designed to make our communities safer for all children and adolescents. In witness thereof, I have set my hand and caused the seal of the city of Peoria, Arizona, to be affixed this 10th day of January, 2017. Kathy Carlett, Mayor. Congratulations.
Mayor and members of the council, as well as all the citizens here tonight with the city of Peoria, we are so grateful that you made this a priority here in the West Valley and, of course, for your residents. This is really a movement, and we really need everyone. That's why we're doing a conference. It is not just about the youth. It's about the parents and the teachers and the police and getting everybody under that one roof to come up with some solutions. And we're going to hear from the students how they want to communicate to those adults in their lives that they trust. So we're really excited about this. We know it's going to be a huge success, and we thank you all for supporting us with this movement.
All right, I am going to stay right here because tonight we would also like to take the opportunity to recognize the winner of the city's inaugural Sustain and Gain brochure photo contest. For the past 4 years, the city has published the Sustain and Gain brochure, which contains valuable information for Peoria's residents' year-round use. It is an effective and cost-saving approach to communicate with our residents regarding important dates and activities taking place throughout the year. Tonight, we will recognize and celebrate the talented Peoria resident, Miss Christy Tucker, who out of 31 entries captured the winning cover photo of a sailboat on Lake Pleasant during one of her many hikes. Thank you, Christy, for doing what you love and for sharing Peoria's beauty.
I didn't think there was any other. Right. We will now proceed to the consent agenda. And tonight's consent agenda includes liquor licenses that require a public hearing. These include a Series 12 license for Revolue Modern Taqueria and Bar, 15703 North 83rd Avenue. Series 10 liquor license for Corner Mart, 8268 West Deer Valley Road. Series 10 license for Arco AM/PM, 8271 West Thunderbird Road. If there is a member of the public who wishes to address a public hearing on the consent agenda, please complete a speaker request form and place it in the bin next to the speaker's podium. This item will be removed from consent agenda and heard during the normal course of the regular agenda. Is there a member of the public who would like to address a public hearing on the consent agenda? Seeing none, and I have no speaker request forms, I would like to ask the council if there are any items to be removed from consent.
All right, is there a motion on the consent agenda?
So moved.
Second.
A motion and a second. Council, please vote. And it passes unanimously. We will now move on to new business. Next item on the agenda is the election of vice mayor. I'm going to read our procedure for this. Pursuant to Article 2, Section 8 of the Peoria City Charter, the City Council shall designate one of its members as vice mayor, who shall serve in such capacity at the pleasure of the council. The vice mayor shall perform duties of the mayor during his or her absence or disability. Vice mayors have previously been elected to serve either 1 or 2-year terms. At the January 5th, 2016 City Council meeting, Councilmember Bridget Binsbacher was elected as vice mayor to a 1-year term. An election for a new vice mayor and the establishment of term length is necessary. So the procedure will be as follows. City Council will first establish the term length by a motion and a vote. Subsequently, the mayor will open the floor for nominations. The mayor will then state which council members have been nominated, and the council will vote by ballot, which will be verbally recorded by the city clerk. We shall begin. Council, may I have a motion on a proposed term for the vice mayor?
Mayor,
Yes,
I propose a term of 1 year.
thank you. Is there a second?
I'll second.
All right. Are there any other motions? All right, we have a motion and a second for a 1-year term. Council, please vote. And that is unanimous. Okay, I will now open the floor for nominations for vice mayor. Now, no second is required for this.
Mayor?
Are there nominations for vice mayor?
Thank you, Mayor. I'd like to nominate John Edwards for vice mayor.
Thank you. Are there any further nominations? All right. Seeing none, nominations for the position of vice mayor are now closed. If we just have one nomination, do we need ballots?
Mayor, you don't need ballots. You can vote by acclamation to accept that nomination.
Okay. All right. So we are going to verbally vote for John Edwards for vice mayor. Councilmember Patena?
Yes.
Councilmember Edwards?
Yes.
Yeah. Councilmember Binsbacher?
Yes.
Councilmember Finn?
Yes.
Councilmember Hunt?
Yes.
And Councilmember Leone? Okay, all right, and I vote yes. So the majority votes in Councilmember Edwards as vice mayor. Congratulations.
Thank you.
And I would like to thank Councilmember Binsbacher for her service as vice mayor for 2016. All right, now we are going to follow the same procedure for the election of Mayor Pro Tem for 2017. At the January 5th, 2016 City Council meeting, Councilmember John Edwards was elected as Mayor Pro Tem to a 1-year term. So we now will move on to the establishment of a term length for Mayor Pro Tem. Council, may I have a motion for a proposed term length?
Mayor, I move that we accept a 1-year term for Mayor Pro Tem.
Thank you. Are there any further motions? Do I have a second?
Second.
All right. Council, please vote. And 1-year term length passes unanimously. And I will now open the floor for nominations for Mayor Pro Tem. Council? Okay.
Mayor,
Yes.
I'd like to nominate Mike Finn.
Thank you. Are there any further nominations for Mayor Pro Tem? All right. Second is not necessary for that. So nominations are now closed, and since we just have one nomination, we can vote verbally. City Clerk, would you like to? It does not have to be verbal? Oh, okay. All right. So just vote for Councilmember Finn for Mayor Pro Tem. And that is unanimous. Congratulations. And thank you, Councilmember Edwards, for your service as Mayor Pro Tem in 2016. That was easy. The next item on the agenda is 28R, and that is redistricting. Discussion and possible action to adopt Resolution 2017-07, approving the redistricting criteria and declaring an emergency for the administrative purpose of decreasing the time frame of adoption of this resolution. Mr. Swenson.
Thank you, Mayor. Of course, the Council is well aware that we are in the redistricting process necessitated by the recent mid-decennial census. And Julie Arundel, our Deputy City Manager, leads our team and will make a presentation.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. Before I get started, I would like to acknowledge that we have the Staff Redistricting Committee and associated consultants sitting mostly in the first row here. But we also have Spanish language interpretation available for anything related to redistricting, including tonight's meeting. So I'd like to give our interpreter the moment to make that announcement in Spanish.
Buenas tardes, good evening, everybody. Si alguien va a necesitar el servicio de un intérprete en español, está disponible aquí esta noche un intérprete. Pueden acudir conmigo para poder proveerles el aparato para que puedan escuchar la traducción. If there's anybody present that requires a Spanish interpreter, please approach me so I can provide you the headsets to hear the interpretation in Spanish. Thank you.
Thank you. The purpose of tonight's presentation is I'll give a little bit of background on where we are in the redistricting process, but for also Council to consider adoption of a resolution to establish redistricting criteria. So just to recap, the City of Peoria is required to adjust district boundaries, thus redistrict, to provide equal population in each of our 6 council districts after each decennial census, which is every 10 years, or in this case, after each mid-decade census pursuant to our charter, and we did conduct a mid-decade census in 2015. Just a brief snapshot of Peoria's history, going all the way back to 1990 when we had just under 51,000 residents. Our 2015 census showed that we had 161,563, and this was a nearly 5% increase from the official 2010 census count. I do want to again note that we do believe the 161,563 is an undercount. In fact, the current census estimate has us at 171,237. We believe it's a function of the methodology that was used by the Census Bureau to do the door-to-door method for conducting the mid-decade census count. However, for redistricting, we are obligated to use the official number, again, 161,563. So if you take that number and divide by 6 so that we have substantially equal council districts, our population goal for each new district will be 26,927. And this is a chart that we've been using, which details the activity within each of our 6 districts between the 2010 census and the 2015 census, and then compares the current number to the population goal. So if I use the Mesquite district as an example, in the 2010 census, it had a population of 25,652. During that 5-year term, it gained nearly 7,000 residents for a current count of 32,623. Now that is nearly 5,700 more than our desired population goal. So that's just an example of the process that we're going to be going through as we redistrict. So this evening, for council consideration, is a resolution that sets forth the basis for redistricting, the legal reason why we're conducting this process, but also establishes the redistricting criteria to provide us with the framework to evaluate maps as they're submitted. So the resolution includes the following criteria by which all maps will be evaluated. And these first 3, please note that these are must items. So under law, the districts must have substantially equal population. They must protect minority voting rights pursuant to the Voting Rights Act, and they must be contiguous. And contiguous means that all parts of the district touch. You're able to walk from one portion of the district to the other without leaving the district. Additional criteria that are included in the resolution should items. So these are aspirations that we have as we move through the process. So the first bullet point, and there's 5, the first bullet point is that districts should be compact, because compactedness reinforces the ability of residents to relate to each other and their elected representatives. The second is to follow visible or man-made boundaries, such as mountains, rivers, and roads. The third criteria is to not contain more than one master-planned, age-restricted community in order to best represent all residents. The fourth is to preserve communities of interest and should not unnecessarily divide neighborhoods that have similar socioeconomic, lifestyle, or political interests. And last, strive for continuity in office to minimize voter disruption. Should Council approve this resolution this evening, the next phase would be to move into our public engagement process. We have tentatively scheduled 6 open houses, 1 in each council district, that are held to encourage public participation in this process. It's a true open house style, so we're having 6 open houses open from 4 to 7. There's no presentation. Residents are encouraged to come in at any point during those hours, before work, after school, to receive information, provide feedback, and even learn how to submit their own maps for consideration through this process. It is important to note that the first phase public participation does close on February 28th, so the open houses have been scheduled to assure that every resident has at least 30 days in order to participate in this portion of the process. It's also important to note that all of the information that would be shared at the open houses are also available on our website. So if someone is unable to attend, they can get the information on our website. They're also free to contact staff at any point in time. To answer questions, we'll also have individuals available to go out to HOA meetings, service club meetings, and present information any way that we're able to. So the 6 open houses that have been scheduled start on Thursday, January 19th. The first 2 are held at Sunrise Mountain Library and New Life Community Church. The second series are on Friday, January 20th at Copper Hills Church, Country Meadows School, and then the last 2 are Thursday, January 26th at the Peoria Community Center and Pinnacle Peak Police Station. To recap the timeline, we're currently in the very first step of this process, January 2017, council consideration of adoption of the redistricting criteria. We'll then move, if approved, into the first round of public outreach. Then in March 2017, the Staff Redistricting Committee will review all of the proposed maps, evaluate them against the adopted redistricting criteria, and present those maps to Council in April of 2017 for you to select 3 to 5, ideally, finalist maps. We'll then go back out into a second round of public outreach to get public input on those finalist maps and bring that information back to Council for your review in June of 2017 for possible adoption of a new map for the city. All of this is being done with the goal of, with the necessary goal of having a new map in place for the council elections in the fall of 2018. And with that, I'd be pleased to answer any questions.
Thank you. Council, are there any questions or comments? Mr. Patena?
Thank you, Mayor. Julie, I have a question about, so I'm assuming at the open houses, you're going to have maps available for people to look at, correct?
No, actually, at this point in time, we're soliciting feedback from residents on how they view their communities of interest.
Okay.
For example, what do they see as the items that unite their neighborhoods? So we'll be seeking information from them on those communities of interest, but we're also going to show them how to use the mapping application so that they're able to submit maps as part of this process. So there won't be any maps except for the current council map for reference for them to view.
Okay. Will there be a time when maps will be available for them to view?
Yes, sir. That would be in the second phase of the public process. So from now until February, actually noon tomorrow, until February 28th, individuals can submit maps through the mapping application. The Staff Redistricting Committee will review all of those maps, and those that meet the criteria will be brought to Council for narrowing down to a few finalist maps. Then we go into the second phase, which is we'll share the finalist maps with the public for their input and their feedback, and that would be the end of the process when Council adopts one of those maps or a version of one of those maps.
Okay, so let's say when the maps are available for citizens to review and a citizen comes up with a recommendation, what happens at that point to make sure that our citizen knows that their recommendations are being considered?
Certainly. So at the beginning of this process, from now until February 28th, we encourage everyone to play with the mapping software and to submit proposed maps. So all of those maps will be under consideration that they submit, assuming that they are going to be one of those that best meet council's adopted criteria. It will be brought forward for council review. But even in the latter phases of the process, say that there are, just for example, 3 finalist maps, and citizens really like one of the maps if one of those was shifted just slightly. That information will be presented by staff to council for your final consideration. But ultimately, the map is selected by the City Council.
Councilmember Finn.
I think you already answered my question, but the gates open on that software program at noon tomorrow. Is that correct?
Noon tomorrow.
I'm very
Correct.
excited about that. Okay, thank you.
Councilmember Hunt.
Julie, let me be clear, going back to Mr. Patena's question. They won't be presented any map to work from, like the existing map of their district? Will they start with that?
Well, we certainly have the existing city district maps. We also have all the information about how much population needs to shift between each of the districts. And on the online mapping software, there's building blocks built into the program so that an individual can click a building block and say that block has 3,000 residents. They can then move it easily from one district to another and see what the rippling effect is across the city. So we're really using in some of our marketing and education materials that this is a puzzle. And so those who really enjoy mathematics and really enjoy solving puzzles, it is an interesting exercise in, it sounds pretty simple. We need to move 300 residents from one district to another, but because of the way the districts are stacked, it really has this ripple effect across the entire city. So there's a lot of tools available to help them provide us with the feedback and the information, and we very much welcome and really are hopeful that we'll have a lot of public participation.
And how would a person who does not have access to the internet in their home or a computer or that skill or whatever, how would they be able to take part in this process?
We're also going to have available just paper, whether it's through, it'll also be available online if someone wants to fill in the form, but at the open houses or if they want to drop off information to City Hall, we'll also take paper feedback. So if they have specific ideas for, again, communities of interest or different things they would like to see included in their district or priorities that they have for redistricting, we are going to accept any and all feedback. It is important to note that when someone submits a proposed map through the redistricting online portal, they do have to complete an entire map of the city. They can't just say, oh, this is what I want, the Acacia district to look like, for example, because it does have those implications to the other districts. Online, they will be required to complete a full map of the city, but certainly on paper, if someone wants to mail something in, bring them to the open houses, see us here at City Hall, we'll take any feedback that's provided.
Well, if they go to the library, for example, and ask for help, they will be able to not only use a computer but access some assistance there?
Yeah, that's a great idea. We certainly have internet, and a lot of people use that at our city facilities. What we can do is make sure we've done the outreach to our libraries so that they also understand and can help from a staff perspective on those mapping applications. The good news is a lot of people are familiar with using Facebook and a lot of the social media. The website was designed to be, it's relatively user-friendly, and so I do believe if someone is comfortable in sitting down in front of a computer with some staff assistance, that they will find it very, very easy to use.
And one last question. Will individual cards be sent to communities prior to the dates?
The way that we were distributing the information on the open houses is we've taken out advertisements in the local newspapers, including Spanish language newspaper. We're going to do a lot of social media with the help of Office of Communication to get that word out. But we're also sending out a customized letter to all of the HOAs within the city to let them know about the open houses, ask them to help us not only advertise those, but again, make staff available to come and make a presentation if they have a meeting that's upcoming that they'd like to receive information on.
Thank you.
Councilmember Binsbacher?
Thank you, Mayor. That was actually my question about getting that information out there. Well, can we receive that as well so that we can share that in our respective districts? Okay.
Absolutely.
And what's the timing of that?
So the open houses are scheduled
I'm
January
sorry,
19th.
the communication about
Oh, the
that.
communications, assuming or with the approval of council adoption of the redistricting criteria this evening, everything is ready to go. If council were to make any changes or want to postpone the adoption of the resolution, we also wanted to be able to, hold off on that and to, follow the lead of council. But if you are ready to consider adoption of the resolution, we're also ready to go.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Vice Mayor Edwards.
Thank you, Mayor. Julie, is it possible to put this in the water bill, or is it too late for the water bill?
That's a good question. I will need to follow up and see about the timing of that. I will look into that and let you know.
That may be another alternative to get it out. And then you mentioned the being able to access it through the libraries. Is it possible to have that icon loaded on the computer at the library so that they don't have to type in the web address? They could just have a click link, that if somebody's interested, they could go right to that icon and do that.
Yes, I believe that is possible. I'll work with our people who are more technically proficient than I am, and we'll see what we can do.
And then thirdly, for those like Councilman Hunt was saying that don't have access to computers, are you going to have maybe some examples that you'll have at the open houses of what one should look like or could look like, so that they have some reference point to say this is the criteria and this is what you need to have, and maybe even have the size sheets of paper that they're going to need, whether it's going to be an 8.5 by 11 or a 13 by 11 or whatever it's going to be, so that everybody's kind of on the same page.
Yes, what gets challenging with not using the mapping application is each of the building blocks has an associated population number associated with it. So on paper, an individual would be able to draw conceptually where they would like to see districts arrive at. But what we would probably do with that information on a staff perspective is go ahead and try to load that into the software just so we have analysis of all of the data. Because also keep in mind we have to be very aware of the minority numbers also, whether it's voting age population or just population. And so the mapping application is a really key tool to staff as well. So absolutely want to do everything we can to make sure that whether people are comfortable with computers or not, they can participate in the process. But we probably will eventually drive most of that feedback into the mapping application.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any further comments? I would just like to stress to our citizens that they truly get involved in this. The city's district system is designed to keep your representatives as close to you as they can possibly be. It is a really good system so that you know who represents you, and the district process, the redistricting process, gives you a voice in actually who you will vote for. So it is the very core of the democratic representative system. So I encourage you to get involved. Don't sit back on this one. It matters in the long run. Thank you. Anything else? So do we need to take a formal vote?
That would be ideal.
We will do so. Is there a motion on item 28R?
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Council, please vote. And it is unanimous.
Thank you.
Thank you. We will now move on to the Vistancia Community Facilities District Board meeting. This is a consent agenda which consists of the approval of the minutes from the September 6th, 2016 VCFD meeting and the acceptance of the fiscal year 2016 annual financial report. Board members, are there any items to be removed from consent? Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Thank you. I have a motion and a second. Board, please vote. And it passes unanimously. The next item on the agenda is the call to public on non-agenda items. If you wish to address the City Council, please complete a speaker request form and place it in the bin next to the speaker's podium. I do have one speaker request form from Monica Martinez. Please come to the podium and state your name and address for the record, and you have 3 minutes to speak.
Good evening, Mayor Kathy Carlett and Council. My name is Monica Ceja Martinez. I am the newly elected Peoria Unified School District Governing Board member. So thank you again this evening. I finally get a chance to meet all of you. I appreciate you coming in this evening as well and supporting our City Council. One part of the process is learning how much you guys do as leaders in our community, and I truly appreciate all the hard work you do through the opportunities of learning and our successes. I'm here tonight to formally introduce myself. 40 years ago, my parents chose Peoria for our Peoria Unified School District and our tradition of excellence. And I am proud to say I am the first K-12 student, teacher, coach, parent, and now a new elected official. I hope that we can continue, and it's great to hear that you guys state the words commitment, passion, citizens. Of our 37,000 students, 86% of them live in our boundaries, and the other 14% choose to come to Peoria. So when we make decisions for our city, please remember those that cannot speak for themselves. Over the next 4 years, I hope to continue to work together in ways that we've never done before. So I open my door. I will come to you. Please come to me, how we can continue work on this relationship. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, and congratulations on your elected position to the PUSD board. We have a long history of working together, and we hope to continue to do so. Appreciate you coming. All right, we will now move on to reports from the city manager. Mr. Swenson.
Thank you, Mayor Carlett. The only item I have this evening is a video of upcoming events.
Enjoy live music, games, and delicious foods from specialty food trucks during Peoria's pop-up dinner parties. These Friday night bashes are held in Old Town Peoria from 5:30 to 9:30 p.m. The next two will be January 13th and February 10th. For more information, call 623-773-7137 or visit www.peoriaaz.gov/special events. Peoria is bringing Black Violin to the Centennial Plaza stage for a free public concert on Wednesday, January 18th, as part of a Martin Luther King Day celebration. Black Violin's music blends classical, hip-hop, rock, R&B, and bluegrass for an exciting experience. The concert is lawn seating, so bring lawn chairs and/or blankets. Parking is free. Food is available for purchase. Admission is free, but please leave your pets at home. For more information, visit www.peoriaaz.gov/special events or call 623-773-7137. Two great city-supported events are coming up. Immerse yourself in the Greek culture at the annual Peoria Greek Fest, featuring 3 days of live Greek music, folk dancing, a marketplace, authentic foods, and more. The festival is February 10th through 12th at the St. Haralambos Greek Orthodox Church. Admission is $3. For more details, call 623-486-8665 or visit www.peoriagreekfest.com. The Prickly Pedal on the Maricopa Trail is a 40-mile mountain bike race that runs along the Maricopa Trail. This year's event will be January 21st and begins in Cave Creek and ends at Lake Pleasant with an after-party beginning at noon. For details and to register, visit pricklypedal.com.
And that's all I have this evening.
Thank you. So we will now move on to reports from the City Council. We'll start with Councilmember Patena.
Thank you, Mayor. All I have is to say that I'm very pleased to be here for the next 4 years, and I look forward to working with you and the rest of this council to keep this world-class city moving forward. Thank you.
Thank you. Vice Mayor Edwards?
Thank you, Mayor. Again, I want to thank the residents of the Willow District for re-electing me, and congratulate and thank Bridget Bensbacher for her service as Vice Mayor last year. You did a phenomenal job, and I look forward to working with you for many years to come. Thank you.
Councilmember Bensbacher?
Thank you, Mayor. It has absolutely been an honor to serve as Vice Mayor. I have learned so much and just had opportunities that I was so blessed to have so early on, and it truly was an honor. And working with this council has been fantastic, and I am looking forward to another 4 years as part of this team and serving the constituents of the Mesquite District and all of Peoria. Thank you.
Thank you. Mayor Pro Tem Finn.
It's kind of got a nice ring to it, doesn't it?
Doesn't it?
Yeah. Thank you for the nomination. Thank you for the votes. I appreciate it very much. And I also want to just say, Bridget, I thought you did an amazing job as the vice mayor. I truly do. I appreciate all your efforts and all that you did in that position. You really did an amazing job. So thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Councilmember Hunt?
Yes, good evening. I really echo what's been said before, that it is truly a privilege to work on this Peoria City Council, to work with this group and to work with the citizens of Peoria. And especially I'm partial to the Acacia District. Sometimes, no, always, it really does take a community to raise a child, to raise a family, to raise a community to a higher level. And I want to thank tonight Curtis Allward, and he only represents a large group, and I cannot get him to say what they are called. They are not an organized group in the sense of having a name, but Curtis is a Peoria High School math teacher, and he also attends CCV Church, so a lot of the volunteers were from those two entities, also just from the community. And they spent 10 days over the holidays going into one of my residents' homes and fixing it from literally a death trap to a fine home that any of us would be proud to live in. She and her 3 granddaughters that she's raised are now safe. They feel proud. They have hope to look forward to. And as she said to me, now I can invite my friends in without being ashamed. So just thank you to everyone in that group, to everyone who turned out and volunteered. It was not a city project. The city spent no money in that home. It was all volunteer and it was all donated. And I just can't say enough thank you to that outstanding group. And did I mention they did it in 10 days? Absolutely amazing. The other thing huge on my agenda is domestic violence summit that the City of Peoria is partnering with the Peoria Women's Club to hold on January 21st. It will be here in our community center. And I was so impressed with the group that you gave the proclamation to when they said, care enough to get in the way. That's an amazing statement. I know even with our own children, sometimes we're like, should I say anything? Especially now my kids are grown, they don't want that. But with friends, sometimes we're afraid to say, I think this or I think that maybe. We're afraid to get in the way when we do see a problem and we could maybe suggest something that would really help them. And we might be just that person that they need to hear that from. Well, the whole purpose of this summit is to shine the purple light on this epidemic of domestic violence. There's no one group that it affects any more than any other group. And the really unfortunate thing is that it has for many years now been seeping into our schools. Our high school students are especially vulnerable, so I was happy to see that this group is touching high school kids. We have one panel on Saturday that deals with youth, not only the violence, but building healthy relationships before it gets to a violence stage. We do have groups right here in Peoria that work with the youth on that. We expect about 150 people. There's still room for you to sign up. It's just $10, and anyone under 18 is free. It's from 8 a.m. to 2 p.m. It's a catered lunch, lots of door prize drawings, and some really spectacular speakers throughout the day that are they're leaders in this. This is their life's work. And I should mention Stephanie Smith, who is our domestic violence liaison, works with the police department, and she's an amazing advocate in this area. So if you'd like to pick up one of these from me, I'll be here for a little bit. They're all over the city in terms of being able to pick one up. And I think that might be all. I hope you all had a great new year, and hope you're looking forward to just an amazing 2017, as I am.
Thank you. Councilmember Leone?
Thank you. Thank you. I just want to say I hope everybody had a great New Year's, and hope you get what you want for Christmas, because I got what I want. I got nothing. So that was my gift. Anyway, I did want to say I went to the pop-up event downtown Peoria, and I have to tell you, I could be a good critic, because that was the worst one I ever seen since I've been going to the events in Peoria. And I don't know what happened, but I think they ought to get somebody down there that knows how to run an event. God bless each and every one of you, and God bless America. Thank you.
Youth Council Liaison Owen?
Thank you, Mayor. I wish to remark on the Care Enough to Get in the Way movement as well. I have experienced plenty of my friends undergoing tough times and indescribable conflicts due to their problems at home and at school, and I've even seen some of my friends contemplating suicide. So this is a very serious issue. I'm very glad that we're taking the initiative to recognize the problem. It's the first step in recognizing that not everybody is perfect, that we're not all problem-free, and that these faults should be embraced by everybody. I've even challenged my friends to open up to me, to relieve their stress, relieve their conflicts. I always try to be an open ear for people to rant to me, anything that'll help them get through the issues they might be going through. And that's really opened my eyes and helped me grow with my friends, having us both accept each other's faults and improve our relationships with each other. So this is the way I've realized that we can help to develop a community, to foster a community within Peoria. So I'm very proud of seeing that we're really getting involved in this. And lastly, I want to wish my congratulations to those who have been reelected to the board, and that is all I have.
Thank you. And I would just like to say that this is a Peoria High School student, and we should all be very, very, very proud. And I know we are proud to have you sit on our city council. Thank you. And to all of you, as we get ready for a prosperous 2017, I wish you all the very best and hope to see you around very soon. With that, we are adjourned.